The downtown Atlanta branch of Harrison Trust Bank buzzed with the usual morning hum. Customers filled the line, papers shuffled, the low whir of printers blended into the background. But at window 3, the noise faded into silence as tension spilled across the counter. 16-year-old Malik Robinson stood with both hands resting on a thick envelope. Inside was his pride, weeks of mowing lawns, stocking shelves, tutoring younger kids. Every dollar stacked neatly with pay stubs folded on top. This was his savings, his effort, his independence. Thomas Whitmore, the branch manager, leaned over the counter. His suit was crisp, his expression sharper than glass. He plucked the envelope from the teller's hands and flipped it open. His brow arched. "This doesn't add up," he said loudly, his voice carrying across the lobby. "Where'd you get this kind of cash?" Heads turned. The woman in line behind Malik frowned, clutching her purse tighter. Malik straightened his shoulders. "From work, sir. I've been saving all summer." Whitmore barked a dry laugh. "Mowing lawns? Don't insult me." He fanned the bills with a flick of his wrist, as though testing their weight. "This deposit smells like fraud." Sophia Martinez, the teller, bit her lip. She had checked everything the stubs matched, the ID was valid, the math was exact. But with Whitmore hovering, her voice caught in her throat. "Sir, everything looks," she started. "Quiet," Whitmore snapped, cutting her down in front of everyone. He yanked Malik's ID from her hand, holding it up like evidence. "Before we continue, if you believe no one should be humiliated just for trying to save their hard-earned money, hit the like button right now. And comment below what city you're watching from. It really helps us share more real stories like this one." A man waiting for his turn whispered, "That boy's just a kid." Another muttered, "This doesn't feel right." Phones appeared, red dots blinking as cameras locked on the scene. Whitmore raised his voice. "This account is frozen until I say otherwise." His eyes never left Malik. "You hear me? Frozen." Malik felt his chest tighten. His pride, his work, his name all torn apart in a few public words. But his voice held steady. Whitmore's mouth curled into a smirk. "Not anymore." He thrust the card into his pocket, turned to the security guard in the navy blazer at the wall, and barked, "Carter, take him to my office. We'll hold him there until I decide what happens next." Security hesitated. He looked at Malik, then at the growing crowd, customers shaking their heads, phones angled high. The boy hadn't shouted, hadn't resisted. He just stood there, eyes bright with quiet defiance. Whitmore's jaw tightened. Now, the guard took one reluctant step forward. Malik's breath quickened, but he didn't flinch. The envelope still sat on the counter like a piece of evidence, and all around him strangers stared, some outraged, some silent, all waiting to see what happened next. Then the glass doors at the entrance opened. Warm Georgia air rushed in. A tall figure stepped inside, suit immaculate, stride calm but commanding. The whisper in the lobby turned to a hush. Malik Robinson's throat burned as he followed the security guard's slow, reluctant steps toward the glass-walled manager's office. The envelope of savings remained on the counter behind him, abandoned like a trophy of shame. Customers leaned into each other, whispering. Phones stayed raised, little red dots recording the humiliation in real time. Inside the office, Thomas Whitmore closed the blinds halfway, as if to signal that the boy's fate was now a private matter. But the crowd outside pressed closer to the glass, refusing to look away. Whitmore set Malik's ID on the desk with a deliberate thud. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Sit." Malik stayed standing. His hands trembled slightly, but his eyes didn't leave the man's face. "Why are you doing this? Everything's real. My pay stubs, my ID, the cash, it's mine." Whitmore's smirk deepened. "You want to know why?" He tapped the envelope with one manicured finger. "Because this doesn't fit. Kids don't walk in here with stacks of cash unless something shady's going on. And shady? That's my job to stop." Outside the office, Sophia Martinez lingered by the counter. Her face was pale, her lips pressed tight. She had seen the pay stubs. She had checked the numbers. She knew Malik was telling the truth. But Whitmore's voice echoed in her head, quiet. Her job, her reputation, her paycheck, all of it hinged on obeying him. Still, she hovered, watching through the blinds as the scene unfolded. Whitmore leaned forward, voice dripping with authority. "Here's how this works. We freeze your account. We hold your ID. We call in a fraud check. Maybe the police, if I feel like it. Until then, you don't walk out of here with a cent." The boy clenched his fists at his sides. He thought of every hour under the Georgia sun pushing a mower, every late night stacking shelves at the corner store, every tutoring session he stayed awake for just to save enough for this moment. And here it was dismissed, ridiculed, treated as criminal. "I earned it," Malik said, voice cracking but firm. "Every dollar." Whitmore chuckled, shaking his head. "That's what they all say. You want respect? You earn that too." The words stung sharper than the accusation. Earn respect. Malik swallowed hard, trying not to let tears sting his eyes. Outside, customers pressed closer to the glass. One woman mouthed, "He's just a kid." Another man whispered, "That manager's out of line." The crowd's unease grew heavy, a hum of disapproval threading through the lobby. Sophia's heart pounded. She glanced toward the entrance. What if someone higher up walked in? What if this blew up bigger than Whitmore could control? She pictured herself on the stand, forced to explain why she stayed silent. Whitmore's phone buzzed on the desk. He ignored it, keeping his cold gaze locked on Malik. "Tell me again, where'd you get this money? And choose your words carefully this time." Malik lifted his chin. "From work. Always from work." Whitmore slammed a palm against the desk. The blinds rattled. Several customers outside jumped. "Liar," he spat. "Do you know what happens to liars in banks? We call the cops. And when they arrive, you'll wish you'd never walked through those doors." Security shifted uneasily near the door. Carter wasn't a cruel man. He had seen Whitmore's temper before, but never directed at someone so young. His jaw tightened as he looked at Malik, calm, scared, but unbroken. Something about the boy's quiet defiance gnawed at him. The manager stood, straightening his tie. "I'll give you one last chance. Admit this is fraud, or I'll have you dragged out of here in handcuffs." Malik's voice came steady, even if his hands still trembled. "It's my money, and you can't take it from me." For the first time, Whitmore faltered. Just for a second, the boy's calm hit harder than his own bluster, but then his smirk returned. "We'll see about that." The murmurs outside the office thickened, buzzing like a hive. People leaned into the glass, watching. More phones rose. Sophia glanced toward the doors again, nerves crawling up her spine. Something was shifting in the room, in the crowd, in the air itself. And then it happened. The glass doors at the front of the lobby opened again. The sound was small, a faint whoosh of air, the click of polished shoes on marble, but it sliced through the tension like a blade. Every head turned. Every whisper died. A tall man in a tailored suit stepped inside, his stride unhurried, his expression unreadable. He carried himself with quiet authority, the kind that didn't need words to command attention. Sophia's eyes widened. She knew that face from the framed photos in the bank's upstairs boardroom. David Robinson's footsteps echoed across the marble lobby of Harrison Trust Bank. Customers parted instinctively, their whispers rising like ripples after a stone strike. His suit was immaculate, navy wool cut perfectly to his tall frame. His stride was calm, yet there was weight in each step, the kind of presence that turned silence into gravity. Thomas Whitmore looked up from behind his half-closed blinds and froze. He knew that face. Everyone at Harrison Trust knew that face, though few had ever seen it in person. Still, arrogance clung to him like armor. Straightening his tie, he stepped out of his office, plastering on a strained smile. "Good morning, sir," Whitmore said, his voice dripping false warmth. "We're just handling a small matter here, nothing to worry about." David's gaze swept the lobby. He didn't answer the manager right away. Instead, his eyes found Malik, standing stiff in front of the office door, security hovering awkwardly nearby. His son's chest rose and fell quickly, but his eyes, they were steady. "Is there a problem?" David asked, his tone smooth but low. Whitmore laughed nervously. "Just a routine check, sir. Suspicious activity. We've got it under control." Murmurs rippled through the customers still gathered. Suspicious activity? They had seen the boy stand quietly, watched as his envelope was torn apart by suspicion alone. Phones continued to record, lenses reflecting in the polished glass. Malik took a tentative step forward. "Dad," Whitmore cut him off. "Carter, step back. This isn't his father. Customers will say anything to dodge responsibility." The guard blinked, confused. But the room stiffened. Even Sophia, standing behind the counter, felt her pulse jump. The audacity of the claim hung heavy in the air. David tilted his head slightly, as if weighing the man's words. He didn't correct him, not yet. Instead, he asked evenly, "And what exactly is suspicious about a boy depositing his own earnings?" Whitmore chuckled again, louder this time, his eyes darting nervously toward the crowd. Sir, look at the amount. Far too much for someone like him. We follow strict fraud protocols here. It's standard. Customers stirred uneasily. Someone like him. The phrase burned in the air, every syllable soaked in bias. A woman shook her head. That's not protocol, she whispered to a man beside her. That's prejudice. David's eyes hardened. I see. Whitmore, sensing his grip slipping, barked toward Sophia. Tell him. The paperwork's irregular. Isn't that right? Sophia's face flushed. Every instinct told her to stay quiet, to protect her job, but she felt the weight of dozens of eyes, the recording phones, the boy's trembling hands. She swallowed. The paperwork is fine, she said softly. The lobby erupted in murmurs. Whitmore's face darkened. Quiet, Ms. Martinez, he snapped, his voice brittle. You don't know what you're saying. David stepped closer, his calm presence dwarfing the manager's bluster. No, she knows exactly what she's saying, and so do you. For the first time, Whitmore's smirk faltered. He tugged at his tie, sweat beading at his temple. Sir, with all due respect, I'm protecting this bank. If we let just anyone… Just anyone? David's voice sliced through him. The room fell silent again. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to pause. Malik's heart pounded. He wanted to speak, to shout, to tell everyone who this man really was. But his father's calm hand lifted slightly, stopping him. Not yet. Whitmore pressed on, desperate. If we allow these kinds of deposits without scrutiny, we open the door to crime, to laundering. The crowd reacted audibly now. He's a kid, someone muttered angrily. That's no crime. Another voice cut in. He's got proof. We all saw it. Phones tilted higher, catching every word. Whitmore's carefully constructed authority crumbled with every second. But he clung to it, raising his chin. This isn't up for debate. I make the decisions here. David finally stepped closer, his height casting a long shadow across the manager. His eyes bored into Whitmore's. No, he said evenly. You don't. The lobby buzzed with confusion. Customers exchanged glances. The tension thickened and still, David hadn't revealed who he truly was. Not yet. He let the moment breathe, let Whitmore's arrogance strangle itself. Sophia's voice broke the silence, trembling but firm. Mr. Whitmore, maybe we should check with the board before escalating further. Whitmore spun on her, his voice sharp as glass. The board? Don't be ridiculous. This is my branch, my rules. David's lips curved in the faintest trace of a smile. Is that so? The manager puffed his chest. Yes, sir. And unless you're on this bank's board of directors, your opinion doesn't matter. The crowd sucked in a collective breath. Malik's stomach clenched. The arrogance, the blindness, the sheer certainty Whitmore had no idea who stood in front of him. David straightened, his voice carrying across the lobby with quiet finality. You might want to check again. The words landed heavy, but he didn't explain. Not yet. The suspense stretched, taut as wire. Customers whispered fiercely now, trying to piece together what was happening. The boy's father, the bank's board, the manager's arrogance. Phones recorded every second, millions of unseen eyes waiting for the truth to break. Whitmore laughed again, a hollow, brittle sound. Check again? I don't need to check anything. I know exactly who's in charge here. David's gaze didn't waver. So do I. David Robinson's thumb hovered over the glowing phone screen. One tap would place a call directly to the chair of the bank's board of directors. The crowd leaned closer, their whispers a low rumble. Phones tilted higher. Every eye in the lobby was fixed on him and the man across from him. Thomas Whitmore's forced smirk wavered. He barked a nervous laugh. Go ahead. Call whoever you want. This is my branch. I don't need permission from anyone to do my job. David tilted his head, his voice calm but firm. Your job is to serve the customers who trust this bank, not to humiliate them. Whitmore's nostrils flared. He pointed toward Malik, his voice rising again. Humiliate? I'm protecting us from fraud. Look at him. He walks in here with thousands of dollars and expects me to believe it's legit? Please. The crowd gasped. The phones recorded. Someone shouted from the back. You don't talk to him like that. Another voice. He showed you proof. David let the noise build. Then he pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice, before a steady voice answered. This is Margaret Pierce. The crowd hushed. The name carried weight. Everyone in the bank knew who she was, the chairwoman of Harrison Trust's board. Margaret. David said smoothly, his eyes never leaving Whitmore's. "It's David Robinson. I'm standing in the Midtown branch. We've got a situation." Silence fell so heavy that the hum of the fluorescent lights felt deafening. Whitmore's face drained of color. He stumbled back half a step. David Robinson?" His voice cracked, then faltered entirely. David continued, unflinching. "One of your managers has detained my son's deposit." He seized his ID. He accused him of fraud in front of half the lobby. Gasps spread through the customers. All at once, the whispers turned into outrage. His son? The owner's son? Phones buzzed in hands as recordings continued. On the line, Margaret Pierce's voice sharpened. "Thomas Whitmore? Is that true?" Whitmore's mouth opened, but no sound came out. His jaw worked uselessly, his face blotched red. David lowered the phone, placing it on speaker for the entire room to hear. "Let's make it clear," he said, his voice calm but steel-edged. "This boy is Malik Robinson. He has saved every dollar honestly, and he happens to be the son of the man who owns a controlling stake in this bank." The crowd erupted. Some clapped, some gasped. Sophia covered her mouth, relief flooding her expression. Security guard Carter stepped back instantly, lowering his eyes in shame. Whitmore swayed on his feet. I didn't know." "That's the point," David cut in. His voice cracked like thunder. "You didn't care to know. You didn't care to listen. You saw his skin. You saw his youth. And you decided that was enough to treat him like a criminal." The words struck deeper than any physical blow. Whitmore staggered as if each sentence peeled away the layers of arrogance he'd wrapped himself in. Margaret's voice boomed through the phone speaker. "Thomas Whitmore, you are hereby suspended pending immediate investigation. Hand over your badge and credentials right now." The crowd applauded. Phones shook in eager hands. The atmosphere shifted from tension to vindication. Whitmore stammered, his voice trembling. "Please, Mr. Robinson, I didn't mean—" "Save it," David said coldly. He stepped closer, towering over him. "Every customer here heard you. Every phone in this room recorded you. The only thing you meant was to humiliate my son, and now you'll face the consequences." Whitmore's hand shook as he fumbled with his ID badge. He unclipped it with trembling fingers and placed it on the desk. Carter stepped forward, his once stoic expression now edged with disgust. He escorted Whitmore toward the door as the lobby erupted in applause. Sophia exhaled sharply, stepping to Malik's side. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Her voice shook, but she stood taller now, unafraid. David placed a reassuring hand on Malik's shoulder. "You don't owe him an apology," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "He owes you one." All eyes turned to Whitmore as Carter guided him toward the exit. The disgraced manager's lips trembled, his voice a broken whisper. I'm sorry. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was public, and it was real." The doors closed behind him. The room exhaled as though a storm had passed. David turned to the customers, his voice steady, commanding, but gentle. "This bank will never again tolerate humiliation in place of service. Every customer deserves dignity, no matter who they are, no matter how they look, no matter their age. That is not optional. That is policy." The crowd broke into applause. Malik stood tall beside his father, his chest swelling with something new, not just relief, but pride. The heavy glass doors of Harrison Trust Bank closed behind Thomas Whitmore, his shoulders hunched as Carter, the security guard, guided him out. His once pristine suit looked smaller now, crumpled beneath the weight of humiliation. Outside, a handful of onlookers pressed their faces to the windows, watching the fall of a man who had thought himself untouchable. Inside, the lobby erupted with applause. Phones stayed raised, recording every moment. Some customers clapped slowly, others shook their heads in disbelief, but all of them knew they had witnessed something larger than a simple bank dispute. David Robinson let the noise settle before raising a hand. The room hushed instantly. His voice, low but commanding, filled the air. "Let's finish this properly." He guided Malik back to the teller's counter, his hand firm on his son's shoulder. Sophia Martinez straightened, her hands trembling as she slid the deposit slip across the glass. David nodded at her. "Process it." Her relief was visible. She keyed the numbers into the system, double-checking every entry as if her career depended on it. The printer whirred, spitting out the confirmation slip. Sophia passed it across the counter with both hands, her voice breaking slightly. "Deposit complete." The crowd cheered. Malik stared at the slip, Then at the envelope now emptied, its contents finally safe where they belonged. He exhaled slowly, a weight lifting from his chest. For the first time since stepping into the bank, his shoulders loosened. David turned back to the crowd. You've all seen what happened here today. A young man, doing nothing wrong, was treated like a criminal for no reason but bias. That is unacceptable. And it ends now. The customers murmured agreement, nodding, some even applauding again. Quick question. While the truth hangs in the balance, do you think bank managers who abuse their power like this should be fired on the spot or given training to change? Comment fire or train below. I'll be reading your answers. David's phone buzzed in his hand. He lifted it, pressing speaker once more. Margaret Pierce's crisp voice carried across the lobby. The board has been informed. Effective immediately, Thomas Whitmore is relieved of all managerial duties. An interim replacement will be assigned, and this incident will be used as a case study in mandatory training. Every branch, every employee. The crowd gasped, then clapped louder. The humiliation Whitmore had inflicted on Malik had now flipped into a sweeping change for the entire bank. David slipped the phone back into his pocket and looked at Sophia. Ms. Martinez, thank you for speaking up. It takes courage to tell the truth when silence feels safer. That courage will be recognized. Her eyes widened. Sir, thank you. Security guard Carter shifted uneasily, his voice low but earnest. Mr. Robinson, I should have stepped in sooner. I knew it didn't feel right. David studied him for a long moment. The measure of a man isn't whether he hesitates. It's whether he chooses to do right when the moment matters most. Remember that. Carter nodded, relief softening his stiff posture. David then turned to the room once more. Harrison Trust will issue a public apology, effective today, and every branch will receive mandatory training, dignity, bias, awareness, escalation protocol. No manager will ever have the power to override proof and paperwork because of their prejudice. Not on my watch. The customers erupted again, clapping until the sound filled every corner of the lobby. Malik's cheeks warmed as strangers approached him, some offering nods, others placing a hand over their hearts. A woman whispered, "You're brave, son," another said. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel small again." Malik looked at his father, his voice low but strong. "Thank you." David squeezed his shoulder. "Don't thank me. You stood tall when you could have walked away. You kept your dignity even when he tried to take it. That's strength no one can buy." As father and son stood together at the counter, Sophia carefully slid a new customer packet across the glass. Inside was a personalized card and a note on Harrison Trust stationery. "We apologize for the treatment you endured. Your dignity matters, always." The crowd applauded one last time, the sound thunderous, echoing off the marble walls. The humiliation was over, the respect restored. The lobby of Harrison Trust Bank slowly settled. The applause faded to murmurs, then to silence, though the energy still pulsed in the air. Customers drifted toward the doors, but many lingered, reluctant to leave as if afraid they'd miss the final chapter of something extraordinary. Malik Robinson stood at the counter, the receipt clutched tight in his hand. He read it twice, his eyes locking on the numbers he had worked so hard for. Every dollar now secure, every hour of sweat and labor finally respected. David Robinson placed a steady hand on his son's shoulder. His voice carried softly, meant for Malik, but loud enough for others to hear. "You see, son? Money can be earned. Respect must be demanded. And when someone tries to take it from you, you don't bow, you stand taller." Malik's throat tightened. "I tried, Dad. Even when he called me a liar, even when he took my ID, I just wanted them to see the truth." David squeezed his shoulder. "And they did. Not because of me, but because you refused to let him break you." Sophia Martinez stepped forward, her eyes damp. She slid a slim packet across the counter, Harrison Trust letterhead shining beneath the lights. Inside was a card, embossed with Malik's name, and a note signed by the board itself. "We apologize for what you endured. Dignity is non-negotiable." Malik opened it carefully. The words blurred for a moment as tears stung his eyes, but he blinked them back. He wasn't ashamed. He had won something bigger than a deposit slip. The crowd began to thin. Some customers stopped to pat Malik on the back, others whispered encouragement. One elderly man clasped his hand and said, "Don't ever forget this day. You reminded all of us that silence is never the answer." David looked around the lobby, his voice carrying one final time. From this moment on, Harrison Trust will not be remembered for the arrogance of one man, but for the dignity of its customers. Every branch, every employee will be trained to serve with respect. That is not a suggestion, that is policy. The last ripple of applause filled the marble room, warm and resolute. As the father and son stepped toward the doors, the late morning sun spilling across the floor, Malik turned to his father. "Do you think Mr. Whitmore will change?" David paused, his expression thoughtful. Maybe not. But his power is gone, and the lesson will remain for him, for this bank, for everyone who saw what happened today. Malik nodded slowly. For the first time, he felt taller, his shoulders no longer weighed down by fear. They pushed open the glass doors, the Georgia air rushing in once more. Outside, cameras still lingered, reporters already murmuring questions. Malik took a deep breath, standing beside his father, the man who had taught him that true strength wasn't in silence, it was in standing firm against humiliation. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. That way you'll never miss the next real story of dignity, justice, and respect. And share this with a friend to remind them respect is the only true currency. Respect is the only true currency. Money may open accounts, but dignity opens doors, and those who try to take it from others will always end up bankrupt.